I want to just
So Tesla was up and down and all around and ended up kind of flattish for the day. But I just want to let everybody out there know you'll want to stay till the end today. I'm going to get Larry's take on a couple of Elon Musk's statements that he just put up a couple of hours ago. So I think this will be fun. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm finally at home, settled in. Very happy to be home. But I must say, I have to hand it to the Cybertruck. It was magnificent. It drove me there, not a complaint. Drove me back, not a complaint. I don't think I didn't have a single intervention that was critical, not one.
Right.
And we're talking about 3,500 miles. So I went from here to Boca Chica, and then from Boca Chica to Austin, Austin to Dallas, and Dallas home. I mean, pretty much drove me all the way.
So you've reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you, and that was somebody mentioned the other day that they thought that the steer by wire, because it is so tight and so quick, could actually avoid some accidents that might not be avoided with regular steering. What do you think? After having driven the thing for so many miles now, what do you think?
It's an interesting idea, and there may be truth to it because it's very responsive, incredibly responsive. It's an amazing car to park, but yeah, it's more than possible. It's incredibly responsive. If you have to get out of the way fast, it's very good at that. Um, so I hadn't given that thought, but I can see the logic behind it, sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a look at what's been going on the last couple of days
So,
here.
so I just want to
Yeah, yeah.
point out
Go ahead.
that the
Yeah.
steer by wire
Yes.
is less and less responsive the faster and faster you go.
Okay. Yeah.
It adjusts to the speed because it's very important. Otherwise,
Thanks.
you touch the wheel and you'd be off the road at high speed.
Right.
So it's
Right.
very, there it operates on a curve.
Right.
But nonetheless, I mean, it's still very much more responsive than an ordinary vehicle. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So last couple of days, we've had a lot of volatility in the stock. Now it is Thanksgiving week, and there's not as much trading and blah, blah, blah. But let's go through a couple of things just to see what your thoughts are on these. Is the California, the Newsom threat, something that investors should worry about, Larry?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, I can't believe he'll be able to follow through on it for the very simple reason, and I think it'll invoke such a firestorm and not only a political firestorm, but um, l- it'll invoke litigation. I'm not sure California and Governor Newsom wants to get into that kind of litigation. To me, it sounds like a crazy idea. I mean, it's truly, it's getting towards the absolute edge of craziness. So I think there will be a huge pushback politically, but also, I think the courts will stop that kind of interference. It's so blatantly political. I could be wrong, but look, governments are not here to choose winners and losers.
Yes.
It's one thing for them to say we want ice cars off the road. I think that's a reasonable that's in the reasonable public interest.
Right.
But it's a whole nother thing to choose, well, you're doing too well, so we're not going to give you any money, but the other guys who are not doing well, we're going to give them the money. I can't remember a case in American history when that was done.
Yeah.
So I think the courts would probably put an end to it, and it may not even be the Second Circuit, the circuit court that runs California, which I believe is the Second Circuit Court,
Could be.
because they
Oh, Ninth Circuit.
required
Ninth Circuit. Ninth.
Ninth Circuit. Thank you. Yes, Second Circuit East. So yeah, I think that they would would absolutely go along with anything the governor says. They're very political court, but on appeal to the Supreme Court, which I think they'd get. I think they'd get an appeal. Anyway, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah. So a lot of headlines, Larry, around Tesla's horrible OSHA violations. Down in Austin, $7,000 in fines for these two
Wow,
OSHA
that's a
violations.
huge number for OSHA. I mean, maybe OSHA's trying to balance the U.S. budget.
So do you think we should be worried about Tesla's violations? And do you think this
Listen, if they're not having OSHA violations, they're not operating. I mean, come on. How many employees have they got in that site now? 15, 20, 25,000. They've got thousands of people, OSHA's going to find violations. That's what the OSHA does. That's their business.
yeah.
Without revenue, they wouldn't be able to exist. So how do they get their revenue? Is they find fines. But if all they could find was $7,000 of fines in that gigantic site, they're not doing their job.
So we've, I'm sorry, this was, all right. Now we have a few major catalysts ahead, Larry. And I think that no matter what happens with California, no matter what happens with the IRA, whatever else, I've been stating now for a while, I would say for about 4 months, that I think that Tesla will sell every car that they can make in 2025 once these four things happen. So the four things are Juniper, FSD unsupervised, Robotaxi, and Gen 2.5. When those four things have happened, I don't see what would stop Tesla from selling, again, every car they could possibly manufacture.
Well, I don't know that all of that stuff will happen in 25. I think some of that stuff may happen in 26. Um, and also I think that look, all the catalysts you've spoken about are on the way. There's no doubt. And early report or the initial sales of of the robot is going to happen, I think, in 25. I'm being a little hesitant because it's going to
Not the
be.
Optimus. I wasn't putting the Optimus in there. This was just
I am. I am.
Oh, you're putting, okay.
I'm putting that in. So the robotaxi, I think Optimus will get reports of it operating in the factory and maybe even the first sales. I think robotaxi, is going to happen in 26. I think the car is just not far along. And it may be that the 2.5 only happens towards the end of the year. All I'm saying is that these are great catalysts. I'm not sure of the timing on them.
All right. So if we change my statement to say when these four catalysts are all four in place.
You're missing two important catalysts, very important catalysts.
Yeah.
Semi.
Yeah.
Going into, because the semi is going to add some significant dollars to the top line.
Right.
And the second great catalyst is Shanghai Megapack factory opening.
Right.
So I think those two catalysts, in addition to the four that you mentioned, of which, full self-driving unsupervised is probably going to be the biggest impact. So all of that's going to be coming in the next 2 years, all of that.
Right.
So I have no idea which one will come when, but each one is a huge catalyst.
Okay. All right. What percent chance would you give? I asked this his name is Nicholas last night. What percent chance would you give FSD unsupervised by July? Just a percent chance.
40%, 30 to 40%.
Okay.
And the reason it's so low is because there's some very specific things they have to solve. Flashing lights, and unusual signs or reading signs or however they're going to solve the sign problem. And flashing lights cover things like school buses, emergency vehicles. If the car can't stop for a school bus, that's a huge problem. And right now it can't. So there are these very specific things that have to be resolved. And I have no idea how much, right now they're concentrating on maneuvers, standard maneuvers,
Right.
clearly.
Right.
And we saw that that piece from the team showing how their drivers
Mhm.
are testing the car, and all of those are drive time, corner cases. But the general case of signs and the general case of flashing lights, these are very important because flashing lights is what a school bus is.
Sure, sure. Well, there's flashing
Uh,
lights all the time.
yeah. And, signs like school. So all of that is very important. I'm sure they'll solve, for example, the speed limit thing pretty well. But the emergency signs and emergency vehicles and school buses, without that, you cannot do unsupervised, period. So it could be by mid-year, but I would put that as a lower level. But when you get to full year, 25,
Mhm.
I think you're about 70 to 75%.
Okay. All right. Not far different than actually what Nicholas was thinking.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay. So now I want to switch to the big news of today that has nothing to do with Tesla. Well, everything that's major has nothing to do with Tesla, but Israel just got a solid victory in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden is taking a bow.
Well, I mean, he's entitled. Every American president, every time Israel makes a peace, takes a bow. And there's no doubt he was involved in it. And so he's entitled to take a bow. I will tell you that Hezbollah was not looking at Joe Biden when they entered into this deal. They were looking over his head to the tall man with the yellow hair at the top. I mean, it's quite clear, once Trump won this election, Hezbollah had to bend the knee. I mean, this is a huge victory because, Hezbollah was always the greater enemy. Fatah could cause terrible damage, as they did on October the 7th. Horrible damage. I mean,
Yep.
unspeakable damage. But really, they don't threaten the nation. Hezbollah threatens the nation. And, they forced the evacuation of the north. I mean, my nephew had to evacuate and he's a professor in the University of the North. So he had to evacuate together with all his students and all of the other teachers. And these guys haven't been able to function for a year now.
Right.
So, or a year and a bit. Yeah.
So is this just a matter now of weeks before Gaza is also solved? What are they going to do without the support of Hezbollah?
Gaza doesn't need the support of Hezbollah because at the end of the day, that it's a true guerrilla war. They can fight on to the death of the last, Arab in Gaza. There was a picture and I posted on X today of the border between Egypt and Gaza. I don't know, did you see it?
No, I didn't see it.
Gigantic walls, gigantic fences, 3 or 4 or 5 fences of different heights and complexity, watchtowers, guns. I mean, that's the border between Egypt.
Egypt, yes. Oh yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah.
you don't hear anything about, Egypt and, I
Yeah, Egypt doesn't want the Palestinians visiting.
they don't want, so all I'm trying to say is that Fatah is not beloved. And they're not beloved by the PLO either, although I think the Fatah have much greater support in the West Bank than PLO. PLO haven't conducted elections for I don't know about decades, but certainly over 15 years.
Yes.
And why? Because they know Fatah would win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fatah threw them out of Gaza. This great Democratic Republic of Gaza.
Yes. Right. Right. So what?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so they can fight on to the last,
Right. Right.
Gazan.
Yeah. What impact do you think this has on Iran's standing in the region? This seems to me
Iran is in trouble, serious trouble. Iran is, I think the election of Trump is a wake-up call for a lot of people, but people think that Putin is celebrating. He's not. People think that, Trump is going to go easy and that, the Russian and Iran axis will survive. It won't. I mean, Trump is a very, very, very strong factor in international relations. People don't have any sense of just how much heft he wields. And I'm not an expert in the field.
Mhm.
I observe just along with every other citizen. But, I read widely, I travel widely, I talk to a lot of people in a lot of countries. If anybody has respect on the ground, it's Trump in all of these countries. And so Iran knows that that Trump is a huge enemy. Iran knows that Trump is gunning for them. And so Hezbollah would never have come to the table if, Biden wasn't about to give way to Trump. I think it would have gone on, although they are hurting badly, I guess.
Yes.
We have to recognize that. But yeah, I mean, if I were in Iran now and I was an Ayatollah, of course, this Ayatollah is in the same state as Biden, but
Right.
the son, I don't think they're cheering right now.
I think you're right. I want to talk to you for a minute about tariffs because the tariff is the other thing that's big in the news, does impact Tesla a little bit. So Jeff and I discussed this last week.
Yeah.
He agrees with me that tariffs are extremely dynamic and that there's no telling how any particular tariff will ultimately affect the final price of any goods. It can be you change countries, you change supplier, you change the way you make the product. It depends on.
And all of that is true, but that's not the point.
Well,
all of that is true.
Okay.
Financially, tariffs can be quixotic in terms of their impact. You don't know what the impact's going to be.
Right.
Tariffs are not a financial tool. They're a political tool. They are it is said that war is diplomacy by other means.
Yes. Yes.
Trump has perfected the art of tariff. Is a war by other means.
Right.
So he uses tariffs as a tool. He's going to close the border using tariffs. He's already, Canada's bent the knee. They'll do whatever is necessary to close that border. They've already said it, said as much as in as many words. The president of Mexico is an unknown quantity. We don't know. I mean, apparently she's quite strong leftist. So we don't know what her reaction is going to be. But if she stands in the way, she will be flattened. I mean, the American behemoth will just flatten Mexico. Mexico is in quite a good financial position right now. Its debt is very low. It's not doing badly at all because of the America trade, because of the deal that Trump made with her predecessor.
Yes.
which Jared,
With-
he actually made that deal.
Right.
Anyway, the bottom line is she's an unknown quantity, but he's going to use tariffs, and she will have to get in line. She'll have to get in line because otherwise, all these factories that have been set up under this tariff agreement will just close, will have to close, which wouldn't be a bad thing for the United States.
Necessarily. Now, on the other hand, we have a lot of trade going the other way. She's claiming she might put in some
Oh, come on.
tariffs.
Mexico buying American goods? Trade going the other way?
I think
What are they buying? What are they buying?
I think they're our second largest trading partner. Now, maybe that's all one way.
Come on. It's one way. What is Mexico buying from the United States?
I didn't look into it, Larry. I would assume it's the same as everybody else, services, computer services, and no.
Mexico is buying computer services?
I would think so.
Come on.
Okay, all right, okay.
I mean, no.
Okay.
I don't think Mexico is buying very much. They may be our biggest trading partner because, we buy all of our manufactured.
A ton of our manufactured. Yeah.
A very large portion of our manufactured goods are bought from there. And if we export anything to Mexico, it'll be components for the cars. Yeah. I mean, get real.
I'll have to look that up.
We need Mexico. We need Mexico like a hole in the head.
Right. Absolutely. So I was, by the way, you just completely obliterated everything I was going to say, Larry, because you said almost exactly what I was going to say. So a lot of people are sitting here being all concerned, even smart people. I mean, so I watched some very smart economists today that were talking about, inflation because of tariffs and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself,
how much inflation was there in Trump's first term?
Yes. And well, now here's my other question though, Larry.
No, I'm asking the question.
No, but if you put a 25% tariff on something, that item still gets imported, does it sell? So it's not going to be there's not going to be.
Just look at the historical case. Look at Trump's first term.
Yes.
Steel, he tariffed aluminum, he tariffed left, right, and center. Right. How much inflation? We had one of the lowest inflation periods of our history up until the pandemic.
Right.
In modern history, if you look at inflation, it was tamer in the Trump term, in the first 3 years of the Trump term than we'd had for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So historically, that's one thing. But I was just going with the logical side, which is
my wife said to me last night in bed, she said, "I'm very worried about these tariffs. It's going to increase prices." And so I had to start the whole economics, and it's really a political lesson. It's not an economics lesson. Yes, if you impose tariffs across the board, or if you impose tariffs broadly across critical trade, it does ultimately, or should ultimately result in inflation. So if all our raw materials were tariffed, if I don't know, all our critical imports were tariffed, we'd see inflation. But that's not what happens. And it's not what happened.
And then Larry, if in fact these tariffs are successful, and by successful, I mean it raises revenue. So in other words, if the item, it has to raise revenue. If it's successful.
No.
So
it didn't raise revenue in 2016. It's not going to raise revenue now.
So
for the very reason that I pointed out, that tariffs are not used in order to replace sorry.
If I got $100 worth of stuff coming in.
You assume you continue to buy that $100 goods.
That's my point. If it's successful, Larry. If I do continue, if it's successful, meaning the product still comes in.
That's unsuccessful.
Okay, so that's what
the country imposing tariffs would view that as a lack of success. You don't put tariffs on goods in order to raise money for the government anymore. back in back in the 18th century and the 17th century, and even part of the, not even by the end of the 18th century, that was gone. Tariffs are really a trade tool. They are not a revenue tool.
All right. So that's kind of my point, Larry. The dynamicism of it is what people
Yeah.
are not paying attention to. If
Well,
in fact, so if in
yeah.
fact, if we step back and we said, okay, Trump's initial statement, I'm going to raise enough revenue from tariffs to get rid of the income tax. So if that was his goal, not any of the other things that we just talked about, but his true goal was to raise enough revenue to eliminate the income tax, then it would have to be successful. It would have to be, the trade would still have to come across the border in order for it to be taxed.
Yeah, but I mean that would really speak to a failure of the tariffs.
Well, I understand because that's not the
Yeah.
real goal. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
I
kind of,
mean, Trump may say that because when you wield a weapon, you don't talk about the weakness of the weapon. You talk about the strength of the weapon. He uses tariffs as a weapon.
right.
And he's been brilliantly successful. I don't know that he'll be that successful this time, simply because you want a war using one weapon one way doesn't mean you're going to win the next war using the same weapon the same way.
Sure.
Doesn't necessarily mean it. But the evidence so far is pretty good. I mean, if you look at what Canada said today, it's clear. So what's more interesting is what happens with Mexico.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
more
with
interesting. Well, China, obviously, that's the end game, China. So I suspect that we will see a lot of jockeying, a lot of noise, a lot of blood and sweat and tears on both sides. But, he's a brilliant negotiator. I used to poo-poo his negotiating skills. And maybe it's that Jared is just a great negotiator. But I really hope that Jared is brought in because he's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with you 100%. All right, you ready for my weird questions? The ones I told everybody to wait.
Oh, these haven't been weird?
No, I'm going to get into the really juicy
By
ones.
the way, I should state, all of this is my opinions, folk. Take it from what it's worth from this old white guy sitting in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just my opinion.
No, I just really was trying to make a point. I've been trying to make the point for weeks on X.
Well, just say it. You don't have to.
Yeah, you have, but people are like like you said, your wife was last night. People just don't get this tariff thing. It's so dynamic. You've been importing and exporting. I've been importing and exporting my whole life. And I know that when you get a tariff, it isn't something that you just automatically go, oh no, I can't ship anymore. Or, oh, I'll just go talk to Walmart and Walmart will raise the price 10%. The Walmart buyer sends you out the door and tells you to go home with your 10%. So, I mean, it's just,
We were manufacturing polystyrene foam cups. This one company I found myself owning for a really weird reason. Anyway, they were the largest manufacturer of foam cups in South Africa, the only manufacturer. And we were buying our raw materials from the US. And the prices were just going up and up and up. Flew to Japan, bought the same stuff,
right.
Literally half the price.
Yeah. All the time.
I mean,
all the time. I think I told you my first import was from Germany. I wasn't the owner of that company, but we were importing 𝐓𝐵US padlocks from Germany.
Yeah.
One of their biggest lines were their brass padlocks, and their brass padlocks were all of a sudden you just couldn't sell them anymore because the German, the value of the German currency went so crazy. So they went to Taiwan and started making their brass padlocks in Taiwan. I mean, people just don't understand the dynamics of all this. That's what I'm trying to bring home. Okay, my first weird question. Will Musk be able to break things in DC? Part of his method is breaking things. Trump loves chaos also, and he loves driving big stakes into sacred cows. So those two will be aligned, but will he be able to get Congress to go along with breaking things? What about the lawfare part of it and the some of the deep state that their apple carts will be being turned over? How successful will he be at being able to break things?
That's a great question. One of the things, I'm trying to do the analysis as to what he could do. And I did do this one piece showing that most of the problems are in the entitlements.
Right.
He has to break the entitlements. That's not an issue of finding misspent money.
Right.
Although I think some of the entitlements are misspent. So I can't see that he can find $2 trillion other than $2 trillion over a period of time across, because after all, the actual employment by the federal government hasn't changed a great deal over time. It's like 2 million people. That's it. That was as low as 1.6, as high as 2.3, but that's about it. So the bigger problem is regulation and the cost to industry of regulation. There he could break a lot of things. And that is a very difficult thing to break because most of it requires legislation. However, they have an incredible tool, and that is the Supreme Court judge reversion of Chevron. He can go into a agency, look at that agency, and say to that agency, "Sorry, that is no longer viable as a rule. You have to drop those rules," and that'll end up in a court case, or may end up in court, or may end up in orders, or may have to end up in legislation. Those are the areas that he has to break. He has to find a way to implement the reversal of Chevron without having to go to Congress.
Right.
There, he can make a huge difference, not to the actual budget deficit, but to the cost of doing business for the American business person, which could add several really meaningful decimal points to the GDP, if not a whole percentage of GDP. And that's the magic number. Sure. Remember, it's not only the expenditure, it's the revenue. It's, if we grew our GDP, I have the numbers and I'm going to do a piece on it. But if we grew our GDP instead of by 2% or 1.8% real growth, and we grew at 3%, we wouldn't have an interest. Our interest would become stable. Our growth would just, diminish the debt over time. So my argument is, if he's going to fix something, he's got to fix it through economic vibrancy. And the only way to do that is to reverse wherever Chevron has added these layers and layers and layers of litigious rules that have all kinds of litigation behind, legal process on top of them that require a huge amount of approvals and process. If you get rid of that, he may not save $2 trillion directly, but he will definitely add many trillions of dollars over a long period of time to our economy. And that's more important than saving a few dollars.
Okay. All right. Okay. I like it. All right. Even weirder, Larry. This is my last one. It's the weirdest one. Okay. So Musk reiterated today. Most people don't know that he said this in the first place, but he posted just before I started the show today. He says that drones and hypersonic missiles are the future of war. I've been talking about that. I've been talking about the drone part, not the hypersonic missiles, but the drone part of this with Brian Wong for about a year and a half. I think I finally convinced Brian that Elon's right. Anyway, drones scare the heck out of me. It used to be Apache helicopters. I could imagine that Apache helicopter coming over the hill, with all the guns. And now it's drones. Larry, you watch these things in the sky, orchestrated, all moving and all, could be independently operated, all on some kind of an AI. Anyway, so Elon has been saying this for a while. He originally talked about drones being the future. Now he's added the hypersonic missiles. Does this mean, Larry, that Tesla is going to get into the drone manufacturing business and that SpaceX will get into the hypersonic missile business?
Well, they are in the hypersonic missile business. No, I mean, their rockets are hypersonic.
Yeah.
If they simply put a warhead on top of them and let them curve back to Earth, that would be a hypersonic missile. I doubt very much whether Elon is going to get into the arms business. There are some really extraordinary armaments manufacturing companies that are startups that are doing extraordinarily well and doing extraordinary things with drones and hypersonic missiles. So Anduril, Anduril has a founder who is just extraordinary. I mean, he is amazing. We met him at the not this, but the previous All-in Summit conference that I went to. No, not the previous one. The first All-in Summit conference I went to in Florida. He spoke, and he started his speech in a very interesting way. He excoriated. Anyway, let's just buy. I mean, the point is he is building an incredible company. It's not only Anduril, that's one company, but there is this very strong Silicon Valley challenge to the primes, these fossils that are still manufacturing arms, that are our main manufacturers of arms, and, these fixed price contracts that they're the biggest drag.
Right.
We only spend about $800 billion a year, not even $1 trillion a year, on the armed forces, but a very high percentage of that money is wasted and misdirected because it takes so long to acquire a weapon, and it takes so much money that we're really limited to how many weapons we can acquire, and we're always behind the 8 ball.
Right.
So So Anduril are solving that because they're not going through the same processes as the primes are going. There are only a handful of primes.
Right.
I don't know the exact number. I used to know those numbers, but you can look it up. Maybe 5, maybe 7, and they go through these absolutely antediluvian processes to sell something to the government, and they always sell it at cost plus, which means that the longer they take to deliver it, the more money they make. It's a terrible business. Terrible business. An aircraft that should cost $15 billion and be delivered by the numbers of 800 to 1,000 ended up costing us, in the $50 billion range. And they've only delivered like 130 or something. I mean, these numbers may not be accurate, but this
I hear
is
you.
the order of magnitude. So all that's to say, Elon doesn't have to go into that business because that business, they kind of understand it. Now, Elon is in the business of delivering equipment to the Space Force,
right,
and to the Air Force and to the military. So, these are very powerful tools that do a huge amount of damage to the enemy. I mean, in a way, it saved Ukraine.
Yes.
In a way, it defeated Russia. This one weapon that he makes,
right,
which is simply, communication satellite. So that just gives you an idea of the power that can come without making, lethal weapons.
Yeah, Brian Wang again says that the Starship, if you loaded it full of ball bearings, and you
Elon's not going to do that.
I'm just saying, but it's
The
just,
Air Force may do it. The Air
yeah.
Force may do it. It is the most powerful weapon. It may be more useful for delivering very quickly very large numbers of arms. It may be that it can deliver weapons. But, I saw Elon posted today that we can't deal with hypersonic missiles. That's not strictly true. We do have a weapon that will deal with certainly this intermediate range missile that Russia launched, the one copy that they do have working, that they launched at the Ukraine. So that we have a weapon called the THAAD, Terminal High Velocity. I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but it is the outcome of the Star Wars efforts that Reagan initiated, and it can deal with ICBMs.
Okay. All right. Well, I just thought that would be interesting to talk about for a minute because what I was thinking about was just Elon's capabilities in terms of manufacturing, the low cost, the high return on invested cash. That probably these other companies, they might have the technology, but do they have the ability to manufacture on that scale at those kind of
Well, Anduril are building scale.
Okay.
They're a Tesla in their own right.
No, right.
They're a Tesla in the armaments industry, and they're building a gigafactory, and they're building it to build weapons at scale in mass production. One of the problems of weaponry is that these primes do not use mass production.
Yeah.
But Anduril are building at scale to build weapons at real scale. So the answer to your question is all of these problems are true, but it doesn't need Tesla or SpaceX to tackle them. It could be that Elon takes us into that field, but I kind of doubt it. I think that he is very fixated on, on the mission at hand.
Of course, the robots might end up being the ultimate soldier to the extent that we even
Absolutely
don't.
right. Absolutely right.
All right. Well, Larry, let's take a look at what happened.
Before you do, there was really powerful
Yeah.
piece that I'm sure you've spoken to some of your other guests about, but I do want to note it because I think I think it may be as important, if not more important than everything else we've discussed.
Okay.
Neuralink got approval to experiment with the connection between Neuralink and a robotic arm.
Right.
And they did say they're going to use an off-the-shelf robotic arm, but later on they may use Optimus components and maybe, use Neuralink to control the whole Optimus,
Right.
which is a very powerful idea.
Right.
And so, when you talk about using Optimus at war, the idea of Neuralink controlling, a regiment of Optimi.
Yeah, we are definitely entering crazy, crazy times. I want to continue to, in fact, encourage people to look at the video that Brian Wong and I did the other day about the first flotilla, the first 5 of the starships going to Mars, which he believes will be loaded up with Cybertrucks and Optimi in order to be able to build out these structures and the landing pads for the 100 that'll come next. Is it 100 or 100 that are going to come in?
As many as come next. Well, I think he's perhaps underestimating the difficulty of using Cybertrucks on the margin in the margin. But okay, fine. I mean, the Cybertrucks were going to have to be incredibly modified. I mean,
modified. Oh yeah, modified for sure.
incredibly modified. It's so much so that I'm not entirely sure the Cybertruck structure is the right structure for Mars.
Yeah. Possible.
I think it needs a much lighter exoskeleton.
The Optimi might need modification as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, operating in that sand environment.
Yeah.
I think it's too early. I think it'd be too anyway, maybe.
Oh yeah. What's happening with Neuralink is on in another entirely. It's just absolutely incredible what they're doing there, and apparently they're gearing up to start manufacturing both the surgical tool, the kind of robot, and the actual product. Yeah.
Yeah, without the robot, it doesn't work.
Right, right.
I mean, he's talking about doing this at scale and on an incredible scale
Yeah.
as usual, So yeah, I think we're going to see some incredible results.
All right. So at the end of the day, Larry, a term I hate, Tesla ended up down 36 cents after being up seven, down. I don't know. It was all over the place. And in the after hours, it has actually gone back into the green, 67 cents. So,
But yesterday was funny because on the weekend it was up like 10 points and then down. I mean, it was crazy.
it was a couple of days of very interesting stuff on the internet. I mean, on the stock exchange. The Dow Jones, which started down 200 or 300 points, ended up positive at 123. The Nasdaq was flat for the day. I mean, everything. My page, Larry, looks like nobody was in the same universe today. Everybody was going off in their own
I
thing.
know, yeah.
The S&P crawled upward all day.
But
The-
we're in a strange time, we're in the Trump trade.
yeah,
It's kind of 2016 redux. We're in the Trump trade, but we've got, the hangover of the Biden administration. We're trying to,
right.
juggle.
Yes. So, I mean, just as an example, I'll even let people, if they want to take a snapshot of this, this is the Magnificent Seven today. The charts, they're not
Up a
following,
little, up a little.
but they're not, but they're all over the place. There's always usually kind of a trend, you know.
Yeah.
But today it was just every one of them going off and doing their own thing. And that was true across the board. So,
Yeah.
interesting day. But the Magnificent Seven were all up except for Tesla. NVIDIA bought back a little bit of the territory it had lost over the last few days. And the Cathie Woods, quite frankly, were the other way. They were also all over the place, but they were all in the red. So it was a weird, weird day. Okay. What about the bonds? What do you think the bonds did today, Larry? Were you paying any attention?
I haven't been paying attention, but I suppose we're back in the inversion.
No, we're not back in the inversion, not at least on the 2 year, but they were back up a little bit today after
Okay.
that nice, it's so nice down yesterday. Thought maybe the trend was developing, but up 32 basis points. I'm sorry, 3 point.
Came close to reinverting, right?
I hadn't, let me look at the 2 year is at
Yeah.
4.24 and the 10 year is at 4.29. You're right. It's not that far off. I didn't notice that, Larry. Wow,
Yeah.
look at that. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, I was thought there was going to be an inversion today, but I didn't look at it, so I didn't know whether we had made it or
Yeah.
not.
So the 10 year though ends up at almost 4.3. That is better than 4.44 where it was last week, but
Yeah.
it's still got a long way to go to make me happy. Oil, basically flat in the pre-market, 68.96 for Texas. And Brent, basically flat also at 72.98. So we did see the war piece of this was yesterday. So they anticipated that the peace agreement
Yeah.
would happen. And so we saw all that action yesterday.
This is the Trump trade in oil. This is the Trump trade. I mean, by and large, the market is following the script.
Right.
Very, very accurately following the script. Yeah, they're a little bit here and there, but look, the Dow Jones is doing great. It's been a while since we've been able to celebrate that. The Magnificent Seven are holding their own, although it's kind of been
Yes.
a
Well,
an inversion.
I heard that. I heard today, Larry. I hadn't paid any attention to this either, but let me give you the numbers. So the mid caps, the Russell is up 5% since the election,
Wow.
but the Mag 7 is only up 3% since the election.
There's
And the small caps, I'm sorry,
large caps.
the larger caps without the Mag 7, they're up like 7% since the election.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
that's the Dow Jones. Yeah.
So there is a rotation taking place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just thought of this, Larry. Maybe it had happened before in other presidential elections when you and I weren't alive and we just don't know about it. But Reagan was the one who actually got something done before he came into office, or virtually the same day. I can't remember which. He got was it the um, he got the release of the
Iranian hostages.
Iranian hostages. Was that
Oh,
the day
yeah.
before or the day after?
The Iranian hostage deal was done before he
Before he
took
kicked in.
the
Okay.
oath of office.
So I'm now thinking maybe that's why maybe he's picking up on that. Because remember, he said, I'm going to accomplish all these things before I even take the oath.
Look, the big deal is the war. The big deal is the Ukraine war.
Sure.
Yes, the Hezbollah piece is important. This is step one, but the big thing is the Ukraine war. And you know, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I don't know that he and Biden aren't talking about it. So
Yeah.
I would just say that there's never been in the last 2 years a better opportunity to get this war done than now. And I saw some very interesting numbers. I saw that Zelensky, the general who ran the war for the first 2 years, who is now ambassador to London, is quite significantly more popular.
Hmm.
Sorry, Zelensky is the president. His popularity is relatively low. Zaluzhny, the
Ah,
the general who ran the war for the first 2 years, who was sent to ambassador to London, is like 20 points ahead
hmm,
of Zelensky in polling,
mhm.
which means that this is kind of like Churchill after the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did this magnificent job in the war for Britain.
Yeah.
A hero for 1,000 years, and he's thrown out.
Right. Right.
And it looks like that could happen to Zelensky as well. So we may be seeing the end game playing out now.
We also saw a poll, Larry, you might have seen it too, that said that the Ukrainian people are, for the very first time, this is the first time that the polling showed the Ukrainian people are done. They're ready to sue for peace,
I I
even if
didn't
they have to
see
give up.
I don't think that's what it said.
I think, yeah, I think it was even, I think maybe Gallup.
I'd have
I'll
to
look
check
it
that
up.
out,
I'll
but
look it up. Yeah.
I've been following polling numbers and they're not, I don't know that they were saying that, but it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So where were we? We were at gold. Oh, we got distracted. Gold, that can't be true. Something's, well,
How often have you said that can't be true when you looked at gold?
these apps, they sometimes work and they sometimes don't. All right, I think it's right now. We know it's true. Gold is this got it because it's got gold, silver, and copper all unchanged. There's something wrong with my app. Uh, Bitcoin down 3,100 to 91.8. We are now down 8% from the all-time high. Is it going to keep going down, or or do you care? Or do you do you have an opinion?
It's these are really interesting moments. Could well do. Could well do.
Yes, unfortunately, my app, I don't know if you have anything handy, Larry. I can't see the equities because the app is not operating. Uh,
See, I can pull up my CNBC.
yeah, that's
Dow
what I'm.
Jones were up 123 points. S&P were up 34 points. Dow Jones were up 28%. Oh, this is after hours. Is
Yeah,
this?
I'm looking for the pre-market.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Uh, that's not the pre-market. The Dow Jones at a 52-week high today.
Again, yes, another.
Yeah.
What do you think, Larry? I've been reading quite a few articles that are wondering if, I mean, I've been talking about this for months. I keep saying that it needs to pull back. And I keep being like, all right, it keeps just going up.
I think it won't pull back until after inauguration.
Really? Okay. Wow.
I think it's on the see if my watch list has got the pre-market.
Yeah, I mean, mine is showing unchanged for that, and gold is still showing.
NASDAQ X oh there we go. NASDAQ is unchanged. SPY is up a little bit. Yeah, I don't have yeah.
Yeah, there's something wrong. I've got a broken app right now on gold and on the equities. Okay, so I'm going to put that card up right here for the Brian Wong video one more time because it's really, really good and people need to watch that one. And Larry, other than that, I'm going to wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
And to you and to all your fans.
And we'll see you on Friday, which will be a short day. I guess you'll be around on Friday. You'll be available for me on Friday.
I will be around and available on Friday.
Well, that'll be great. All right. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Happy Thanksgiving all.